All right. Hello, everyone. We are happy to have you here joining us for our From the Field this month with Shawn Thiele from IGP at K-State. I am Brittany. I'm the Executive Director of the Idaho Wheat Commission, and I will just go ahead and let Shawn introduce himself and kind of take it from there. And then I just want to remind everyone that questions are absolutely welcome. And if you have any, you can either put them into the chat, you can just unmute your microphone, or you can use the icons at the bottom of your screen right down here. There's one that says reactions, and you can raise your hand and we'll make sure you get your question asked. So Shawn, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. And good afternoon, everybody. As Brittany said, my name is Shawn Thiele. I'm the Associate Director and the Flour Milling Specialist at the International Grains Program Institute in Manhattan, Kansas. So I was asked to just provide a update kind of on what IGP is, what we do, and then also talk a little bit about wheat milling and what's involved with the process of reducing the wheat into a high quality finished product, as we know of flour. So that's what I'll talk about today. I would encourage, as I'm going through, if you do have questions, please ask, and I'd be happy to entertain more of a discussion than me talking to everybody for an hour, however long we have. So I do have some presentations that will maybe give a little bit more visual aid to the conversation. So I'll share my screen quick. All right. Do you got it?
Yes, we can see it. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So the IGP Institute, you need my contact information later. It is right here on the first screen. But we are part of Kansas State University. So Kansas State was the first ever land grant university, really founded to support food production, food security, and agriculture. So within Kansas State University, we have the College of Ag. We're roughly 20,000 people. The College of Ag is the largest college at K-State. And one of the departments in the College of Ag is the Department of Grain Science and Industry. So we are very unique in that we used to be able to say we were the only Department of Grain Science and Industry in the entire world. That is no longer true. China has a university, Henan University. They've also tried to adapt a program similar to K-State's Department of Grain Science and Industry. But we have three main undergraduate areas of focus. So the first being milling science and management, the second being feed science and management, and the third bakery science. So those three undergraduate degrees you can get a Bachelor of Science in, or all the way through graduate degrees and PhDs in grain science as well. They're still very unique, and we're the only school in North America and South America that offers those type of specific degrees to those areas. So today we're going to be mainly focusing on milling science, and that is, the reduction of grain into a finished ingredient or usable product. The other then unique thing about the Department of Grain Science and Industry is IGP Institute. So we are the outreach or extension of the department. So IGP was established in 1978 in partnership with the state of Kansas and the state of Kansas commissions.
Hey, Shawn, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Can you switch your slides to presentation mode?
Am I not in? Let me share my other screen.
Get a better view of those participating to look at those. Yeah.
Yes. Is that better? Is it full screen now?
Yep, there we go. Thank
Okay.
you.
I was on my screen number 2. I should have been on number one instead of
Yeah,
number 2.
No, all
Okay.
good. Thank you.
So, so IGP was created in partnership with the state commissions in the state of Kansas to help serve national producers through international and domestic training programs and outreach. So our mission right here is simply to provide technical training to benefit benefit industry professionals around the globe and help enhance the market preference for U.S. grains and oilseeds. So top left here, you'll see our IGP Institute Conference Center. Inside the Conference Center, we have an auditorium, an official USDA federal grain inspection approved grain grading room. We have a boardroom that'll hold about 20, another multi-purpose room that'll hold about 35 trainees. The auditorium will hold roughly 70, and we have a capability for translation into 3 different languages simultaneously, but a lot of different options in the conference center for us to conduct the training programs that we do that I'll talk about here in a little bit. The Bioprocessing and Industrial Value Added Innovation Center, we call it BIVAP. That's kind of our extrusion center. So twin screw and single screw, a lot of extrusion work done in there. The Hal Ross flour mill on the bottom left. This is our commercial full-sized, but very small commercial flour mill. It is registered as an official flour mill in the state of Kansas. And then our OH Cruz Feed Technology Innovation Center feed mill from where the feed students and all the animal food production is taking place for the state, or for Kansas State. Our reach in 2022, you can see our numbers. This is pretty normal for a year. We usually host around 60 to 70 courses per year. We usually have between 50 and 60 countries, so participants from 50 to 60 different countries attend. And our participants are usually around 12 to 1,500, depending on the year. Additional outreach is just different work that the content experts at IGP do when we attend conferences and give presentations and workshops at different events around the world. So over the last 5 years, we've averaged 351 courses and impacted almost 7,000 participants. So our content experts are 3 main areas of focus, adapting into 4. The first would be grain processing and flour milling. So that's my kind of area where I focus on training, technical training, and courses all the way from, selecting the right grain for your product, the right quality, through grading, technical milling, basic introduction, basic and advanced milling, mill optimization, food safety, maintenance, kind of the whole gamut from start to finish. Second area is feed manufacturing and grain storage. This guy right here in the purple shirt, Carlos Campopadal, heads up that area. He does the same type of thing that I do on the human food side, except for his focus is on the animal food side of things. And then we have grain marketing and risk management courses and training. This is done by the individual on the far right in the photo, Guy Allen. So he's our senior economist, and we'll do courses and trainings on purchasing, writing good contracts, risk management, understanding freight, logistics, and kind of everything in that realm. Not on here is another area that we've started to get into last year and we're continuing to build this year, and that's around baking. So starting to do a lot more training on baking for our end product customers and bakeries that trying to fill a gap that was left when AIB went out of the training business a few years ago. So we're funded a little bit through the state of Kansas, maybe a third of our funding through the state. And then we get funding from our state Kansas producer organizations. So the Kansas Wheat Commission, Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Corn Commission, and the Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission all provide us yearly grant funding dollars to help us continue to meet the mission of IGP. And then also through work we do with national producer organizations such as US Wheat, USEC, US Grains Council, and the Sorghum Checkoff Program. We also partner with Dealer and IOM on flour milling courses, AFI on the feed side. We do work with the USDA and courses with them, and also work with different export customers, government agencies, and universities around the world, hosting courses and trying to bring in and help support the budget needs of IGP through courses with partners. So our partners are a very big part of the International Grains Program Institute, and very important to us and us meeting our mission. So we do courses on site through the facilities that I showed earlier. Do courses on location, meaning we'll travel anywhere around the world where we're needed to conduct courses. We can do both. Sometimes we'll do virtual courses for part of it, and then a hands-on component or on-site component for part of the course. So more of a blended. We can offer courses in any language through translation services. We do a lot of work with visiting trade teams for all the different commodity groups, as well as work as technical consultants and speakers for groups around the world and users of U.S. grains and oilseeds. A little bit of research from time to time as the need comes up. So we do work with applied market research as well. And this is our team. We're expanding upon it. We've got a distant education individual in here that wasn't here at the end of last year. We've just hired this year, and we're working to hire another individual project coordinator. But yeah. So most of what I told you earlier on the course numbers, those were all mostly on-site course numbers. We're continuing and really starting to grow our distant and virtual programming this year and next to hopefully reach a lot more individuals from around the world to share the news of high quality U.S. wheat and U.S. grains. Any questions at this
Shawn,
point?
How is IGP promoted throughout the globe?
That's where we need to build our communications team. We used to have a larger team, and through state budget cuts and things, we've lost that a little bit. But some of our biggest promoters are those partners that I mentioned earlier. So like U.S. Wheat Associates promoting IGP, as well as some of the other partners they work with. USEC is a large promoter of us as well on the soybean side. On the Grains Council, U.S. Grains Council does a lot of work with us. So our partners are very important, as well as our industry partners. Being a very unique program, as far as the milling science program, the baking science program, and the feed science program, our industry partners talk about us and try to promote what we do around the world, because they're coming here to get their students and people that are going out into the industry, since there's nowhere else to get them. So still a major gap for us, though, as you know, the number one thing the industry needs is more students in milling science, baking, and feed, and we don't have the numbers. They could easily hire 2 to 3 times the number of students, number of graduates we put out in those areas. So, 100% job placement, and IGP being the extension of that, we work a lot with the industry, so we're tied in that way as well. And we do have social media channels. We do have a Instagram account, Facebook account, LinkedIn account, and somewhat active on our social media, but that's one position that we're looking to refill to get more engagement that way. Yeah. Other questions? Will we jump into flour milling process?
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the milling process, Shawn. And again, this is Brittany. I have my camera turned off because I'm sitting in an airport, so hopefully it's not too loud background noise either. But if we could just do kind of a Q&A about the flour milling process. I know there's a lot. We always think of flour milling. I think oftentimes flour milling in our minds is just crushing wheat kernels, but it's really a much more technical and scientific process than that.
Yes.
Can you kind of expand on that?
Absolutely.
And just to piggyback on that, Brittany, I attended the crash course at K-State a couple months ago with Shawn, and Brittany's absolutely correct. It's way more than just crushing a kernel of wheat.
I always say in real simple terms, it is really just grind, sift, grind, sift. So crushing the kernel, but it's done in a delicate kind of way where we have to gradually reduce and grind very softly over and over and over again in order to get the high quality of flour that the customer is usually demanding. So that being said, if we are making a whole wheat flour, a whole grain flour, that is a little bit different ball game where it really is grind and crush it into a small particle size and get it into the bag. But most of the flour produced in the U.S., the world too, but in the U.S. specifically, over probably 90% of the flour is what we call refined flour, which is just white flour, if you would, where we're separating the bran and the germ from the endosperm. So if we break the wheat kernel into its 3 main components, about 14 to 15% of that wheat kernel is bran, the outer layers. Roughly 2.5 to 3% of that kernel is the wheat germ, or the embryo of the wheat kernel, and then the rest, the inner portion, is the endosperm. That's roughly about 82%, 82 to 83% of the wheat kernel. So the goal of the flour miller most of the time is to extract as much of that endosperm, as much of that 82% of that wheat berry out, separated from the bran and the germ as cleanly as they can. So with as little bran contamination and germ contamination in that refined white flour. And that's really kind of our quality measure right now in the US. Some countries it's a little bit different where they're more on a color specification, but in the US we call that a measure of ash content. So the higher the ash content, the more bran contamination that we've introduced into that flour through the milling process. And the bakers tend to not like that at a certain point.
Shawn, does having that ash or bran content change the color of the flour? How do they know if there's too much?
Yes and no. A lot of that can depend on, is it a white wheat or is it a red wheat as well? So red wheat, the bran is darker in color. So the more bran you get, the darker the flour is going to appear, versus a white wheat. You can get away with more bran contamination in that flour, and your color will be still whiter in appearance. However, the ash content will still be high. So when you think about what is ash, ash is all the minerals that were taken up by that wheat berry, by that plant when it was growing. And so it's those minerals that won't burn down. If you were to take the flour and burn it down, the minerals and everything that are left is our ash content. So most of those are found in the bran layers, which is why the bakers like to use it as a specification for our millers, because it's very easy to test for. So yes, ash content will go up the more bran you get in the flour, but the color will get darker, but it'll get darker quicker on a red wheat versus a white wheat, right?
Shawn, how does that ash content affect functionality of the flour? Does it have any effect on functionality, or is it purely on appearance?
Depends on what baker you talk to. So it doesn't start to affect the functionality right away. You can get away with a little bit. So the endosperm has naturally occurring ash in it, which is usually about 0.35%. A lot of our, say, bread flour specifications or our refined flour specifications could be an ash content of a 0.4 all the way up to a bread flour maybe of a 0.55%. So we're adding a little bit more in, and that's a lot of bakers are going to say that's not going to have a significant impact. But as you start to incorporate more and more bran, it tends to act. That's a pretty technical question, but it tends to start to act as a divider between the gluten network. So the proteins, when the gliadin and glutenin proteins, when they form together to make your gluten, when they come together, when the water's added to the flour, if you have bran slivers in there, instead of having a nice tight gluten matrix, all of a sudden you introduce like a kind of a block, if you would, a toothpick or something, where then that strength will not hold as well. But that takes a higher amount of bran or ash than most would think, is what the bakers tell me. So, and it also is product dependent, right? So breads, cakes, cookies, what are you making? It could have more impact on certain products than other products, right? That's when you talk about finished product and quality of flour, you really have to understand your end use product. So what is the flour going into? Your customers will tell you that, and they will know what kind of flour quality that product needs to be, and what kind of wheat does it need to be milled out of. So how much protein does it need? Does it need to be a soft wheat or a hard wheat? Maximum ash specification, a max protein or a min protein. There's so many different factors that go into what flour quality, that it's hard to give you just a one straight answer on that. So a lot of times I say there might not necessarily be a bad flour, it's just being used in the wrong application. I think I have a.
Oh, sorry, this is Jill. I have a question. Just when you go to the grocery store and buy just your all-purpose flour, what are you even getting? And, is it from a hard white wheat, hard red? Do we even know? And is there certain kinds of flours that you should look for different applications there?
It's a good question. Let me share this screen. Is that coming through all right?
Yes.
So the wheat, different classes of wheat have different proteins. Our soft wheat flours, soft red winter, soft white, are typically found, typically going to have lower protein contents. They're going to be used in all of our pastries, cakes, cookies, donuts, all of the very soft mouthfeel. I call it the products that we love to eat that aren't so good for us. Also in our Asian style noodles, as we start to get into our medium protein range wheats, we have, you can see to your question, Jill, the all-purpose flour. This is where our hard red winter, hard white winter wheats are going to start falling in. And those are really optimal for our bread products. As we get into our higher protein spring wheats and durum wheats, you'll see durum right here, used to produce durum semolina to make our pastas. And then our higher protein spring wheats are also really good in our hearth breads, our whole wheat breads. Some of those products that need the extra gluten to get the extra strength, to make them what they are, bagels, things like that. So what's unique about all-purpose flour is you can see kind of falls in the middle of the chart, where it's not necessarily ideal for our cakes and cookies, but it still makes an okay cake and cookie for the average home baker. Or it doesn't quite have the strength that we want for some of these whole wheat products or hearth breads or products we see on the far right, higher protein levels. So it's just kind of an all around wheat that works pretty good for everything, but really great for our bread products. So you'll see the all-purpose flour usually out of a winter wheat, a hard red winter, hard white winter wheat, but that not necessarily is that always going to be the case. It also depends on the part of the country you come from. There's just no real specification on what all-purpose flour has to be. So depending on the wheat years, last year with a lot of drought going through the Midwest, where a lot of the hard red winter wheat was growing, we had higher proteins. So the all-purpose flour that people are using this year has probably got a lot more strength to it because of the higher proteins and what they'll see on years where the average wheat protein content is lower. So it really depends. Sometimes there will be spring wheats in all-purpose flour blend. Sometimes there'll be soft wheats blended in there. It could be all of the above, but typically it's going to be around 11, I say 10 to 11 protein finished flour, usually from a winter wheat, hard red winter, hard white winter wheat.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have a couple of questions coming in from participants. Casey, I'll let you go ahead and ask Shawn those questions.
Perfect. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, Casey. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. I was wondering what farmers.
You muted right when you started your question.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
They didn't want me to ask these tough questions. I was wondering what farmers can do to ensure that we are producing good milling quality wheat.
Oh, that is a that is a tough question, huh? So a lot of that comes on your guys' side of things, right? On genetics and understanding the lines that are out there, but also when it comes to wheat quality, it's very easy to measure, like I said, ash, but also protein. But that protein is the protein quantity. So how much protein is in the wheat? Now, usually we can say the higher the protein content, the more strength and the better everything's going to work, but not always. So quantity doesn't always relate to quality. And that's where the work of the commissions and the wheat breeders is so important, that the new varieties that they're looking to introduce obviously perform well for the farmers and with yield and ability to produce and grow to make profit, but also on the quality side, high quality protein wheat or performing wheat. And so that's much harder to understand, and that you have to go through a whole series of tests, wheat flour and dough testing, different methods and machines that they can use to analyze how good the protein is in that wheat, not just how much is there. So that's important. Other things, if you want to, what the millers are concerned with, test weight. So usually higher test weight is better for a miller because we can extract more flour. So if we get a higher test weight, typically we see more flour out of the same amount of wheat. So that's more profit for the millers. They like that. That's not always the case. Sometimes very small wheat berries can be deceiving in the test weight cup, and you can get a high test weight, but you have small kernel size. So the millers are more concerned with 1,000 kernel weight, where we'll actually measure 1,000 kernels, count off 1,000 kernels, machine will do it, and then you measure it. But higher 1,000 kernel weight means larger kernels. That's what the millers like. So the larger the wheat berry is, the larger the wheat kernel, the more flour we can typically extract from that wheat. And so that's important. Overall ash content on the wheat. So we like to measure that. Depending on where that wheat's grown, what region it's coming from, you could have wheat that just has more ash in it. So you could see wheat from a maybe 1.6, 1.8% ash content, all the way up to 2.2, 2.3% ash content. And as a miller, we know that the wheat that has a higher ash content coming in, we're going to get a lower extraction, because in the US anyway, we're still held to the baker's quality specification of ash. And so if there's more ash in the wheat coming in, then we're going to have to grind a little bit more gentle on the mill, and we're going to lose a little bit more extraction there. So that's a key measure that the mills are looking for. Weed seeds and contaminants like that are never good either, as well as wheat not fit for milling. So shrunken and broken wheat kernels are important. They're very concerning for millers, because we can't get good extraction out of shrunken wheat kernels. Broken wheat kernels pose a risk with micros, so your microorganisms, because the endosperm is no longer protected from the bran layers. So you could have different things work their way into your flour that way. What else?
Shawn, how much protein do you lose in the milling process? Do you lose any protein, or how much?
It's a good question. Roughly 10%, well, on a refined flour. So if you have 12% or 10% protein wheat coming in, by the time after we mill it, because the bran layer does contain protein. So when we mill it, we remove the bran from the endosperm, we'll lose about 10%. So your finished flour then would be, 9 or whatever it works out to be. So the other interesting thing with that is the good protein, the protein we're looking for is found in the endosperm. So the gluten containing protein is found in the endosperm. As you get to your proteins on the outside of the wheat kernel and your albumin layers and your bran layers, those are not so much usable. They're gluten forming proteins. So it is containing protein, but as you continue to add it in, it's not necessarily helping with your strength and your quality characteristics you're looking for that gluten that we all love because of wheat, right? It's a very, very unique crop where very little grains or no other grains really have that unique mix of proteins that give us gluten. So,
Shawn, is there a difference between the milling process for soft and hard wheats, and what's that difference?
yes, kind of. The hard and soft wheats mill very differently on your mill. So you have to start to break down, and maybe pull a slide up for you here. So when we look at the milling system, you know, you have all of these roll stands on your roll floor in the mill, and they're all doing, I say you can break it into really two halves. The first half we call the brake system, right here. So the brake system, and all we're doing right there is trying to open up the wheat kernel and remove the endosperm from the bran. Okay, so that's the first half of the mill. We're not really trying to produce flour there. Now on a hard wheat, this is very easy to do. We can open that wheat kernel up and we can scrape the endosperm away from the bran layers pretty efficiently. It's very easy. Softer wheats, that endosperm tends to stick to the bran layers a lot more. So it's more difficult to get a clean separation of bran and endosperm. So we see a little yield loss on the soft wheat on the brake system. The soft wheat also, you can see in this photo over here, that's after first break. So the first grinding passage when we open that wheat berry up. On soft wheat, we tend to see this endosperm just kind of fall apart, and we get a lot more flour production on our brake system, on first break, second, third, fourth, and fifth break, just because of the nature of the endosperm and how much softer it is than the hard wheat. So our mill system has to be, or ideally is designed to accommodate the type of wheat that we're milling. So soft wheat, we'd like to see more brake rolls because we need to work on that bran a little bit more to try to get the endosperm off so we can maximize our extraction rate. Hard wheats, we don't need quite as much brake roll system because the bran, that endosperm cleans up from the bran a lot more. So then the other part of the system, it's kind of a middle system. We call it the purification system. That can be done on a machine right here, like a purifier, or it can be done on a roll stand. But it's just removing, you know, through grinding, we're trying to keep bran in as large of pieces as possible. But we do break them up, sliver them, and create fine bran pieces. And those fine bran pieces we have to clean out. We have to remove from the endosperm pieces before we try to grind that endosperm into flour. And so that's where the back half of the mill system is, or the second half, you know, of all of these machines are coming into play, is this reduction system right here. And this is really where we've removed the endosperm, we've cleaned the little pieces of bran out from it. And now we're working to, you know, as we say, get the flour into the sack as soon as possible. So we're going to grind hard. We're going to try to get as much flour out as soon as we can. And we just repeat, we grind, sift, grind, sift, grind, sift until that endosperm has been reduced to a small enough size to turn into flour. On hard wheat, this is going to take more roll surface because that endosperm is naturally so much harder. It takes a lot more effort and work to grind it into flour. So we need more rolls in the reduction system. On soft wheat mills, it's just the opposite. That endosperm is very soft. So with a little bit of pressure, we can very easily reduce that particle size and turn it into flour. So soft wheat tends to be a little bit stickier, the endosperm, so we need more sifting surface. So here are sifters. It's going to take more sifting surface to get our separations we need compared to hard wheat. Those are the big differences, if you would. But the process is still the same. So how we mill it through grinding, sifting, purification in there is still very similar. It's just how the product flows through the mill is a little bit different.
Shawn, is there an ideal time between harvest and milling?
Yes, yes. So right after harvest, the wheat does not mill as well. We call it, millers will call it green wheat. So even though it's dried and dead in the field, when it comes off and goes at the bin, if they try to put it on the mill right away, it just doesn't perform as well. So we usually like to wait at least 30 days for that wheat, they call it, to mature before we'll send that to the mill. It's the same thing for the bakers. So when flour is coming off of the mill, fresh flour, bakers will call it green flour. It's not matured enough, and it will not function as well in the bakery or in the products that they're trying to produce with it if the flour has not aged as well. So flour or bakers have some other options with some maturing agents they can use in that flour if they have to, if they don't have time to wait. I usually hear seven days at least on the flour side. 4 to 7 days would be the quickest, but so yeah, green wheat, green flour. You have to ask the scientist why. I don't know. Question, right?
There was a question, but it just got answered, it looks like.
Well, I can run through. How long do you have me for?
Well, we normally stop at about 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And we have been going for about 45. So I think if there are other questions, I have one, Shawn, just about bleached flour. Why do we bleach it? And the difference between bleached flour and chlorinated flour, and why do we chlorinate?
Yep.
What's that process?
So it's bleached flour is usually done with benzoyl peroxide. It's an additive we can put in the flour, and you have to wait a day or two to allow that to work. And it's just a whitening agent, so it just gives the flour a whiter appearance. Way back when, it was very common. I think almost most flour was bleached, but nowadays, when consumers hear or see on the bag bleached flour, it kind of triggers a red alarm, or sends up a flag and says, wait a minute, why am I eating bleach? That's not good. So just awareness, understanding that it's not bad for you, but perception says it is. So a lot of our flour is not bleached anymore unless it's for a very specific product, say like an angel food cake flour or something like that, where a very white crumb grain or appearance in that finished product is very important. You'll see bleach added there. Chlorinated flour is just done on cake flour. So our soft wheat flours for cakes, and it's done through a kind of enclosed conveyor type of machine where chlorine gas is injected and mixed in with the flour, and it lowers the pH, and it changes the functionality of that flour a little bit for your baker on their cakes. So really used for high ratio cakes, or cakes that have more sugar in them than they have flour. And so in order to hold that structure and keep that cake from collapsing, using that chlorine gas to lower the pH helps them with that. Now, again, that's got a lot of negative red flags with it as well, and people don't like to hear that either. In Europe, they won't do anything with that, in other countries. So we're working on finding a substitution for that. They're through heat treated flours and other methods, but they haven't quite found anything that works quite like chlorine does. So we'll see what comes of that in the future. Millers will also use chlorine, will treat the water on their conditioning water. So the water that we're adding to the wheat to help it process better, toughen the bran, soften up the endosperm, we'll typically treat that with chlorine to help kill microbes, bacteria, things that might be on the wheat kernel. But that won't introduce or affect the finished flour at all, like bleached flour with benzoyl peroxide or chlorinated cake flour with chlorine gas.
Okay, and one question that I have gotten a few times is we talk about wheat being kind of a complete nutrition food. So if it is a complete nutrition food, this is the question I get asked, and maybe you can explain it better than I can. Why do we enrich our flour in the United States?
Yep. So back to the milling process, we're removing the bran and the germ, right? And the bran and the germ contain or are holding most of our nutrients in the wheat kernel itself. So the endosperm alone isn't unhealthy. It's not bad for you, but it doesn't contain those vitamins and minerals that are primarily held and found in the germ and in the bran. So when we remove them, we're I guess losing some of the nutritional benefits of that wheat. So through the enrichment process, we add all of those vitamins and minerals back into the white flour so that it's just as rich in vitamins and minerals as your whole grain flour, but you're still missing one major component, right? With an enriched white flour versus a whole grain flour, and that's your fiber. So through the enrichment process, we're actually making that flour very healthy. Some scientists claim that your body can absorb more of the vitamins and minerals from an enriched white flour than it can from trying to get it from the bran and stuff, bran and germ eating a whole grain. But a major component of health is fiber, and that's very important component of whole grain product that you're not getting near as much of anyway in your refined white flours. That answer your question, Brittany?
It did. Is it true that we've seen a decrease in birth defects since we started
Yes.
enriching our flour?
Absolutely. And that is because the addition of folic acid. So folic acid is not naturally found in wheat. That is an additional vitamin that we're adding into the flour, and that was just for your point of to help reduce birth defects and stuff, because when that started, bread was a staple food in everybody's diet, and so if folic acid was in the flour, it was in the bread and in the products that individuals were eating, especially at that time targeted for pregnant mothers, and that has helped reduce birth defects and a lot of other health diseases and effects as well. There's actually an organization that focuses nothing but enrichments and folic acid, and that's the Food Fortification Initiative. They have a website, but it has all of the statistics, and, you know, graphs and charts and showing you just when fortification started and how much it's reduced and helped with issues like that. So the challenge that they face is it's not required in a lot of countries. So I think only about 30% of all the refined white flour in the world is actually enriched. So in the United States, it's mandatory, it's required by law. Canada, Mexico, kind of a lot of North America and South America is required by law. But on that website, it also has a map of the world, and it'll show you every country. And it is enriching the flour required on wheat, but also corn and rice. And you can kind of see that impact. But where you see it not being required by law, a lot of times it's not done because it's adding extra cost into that flour. And if you're in a very competitive market where your baker is gonna drop you to go to a cheaper supplier to save a penny a bag on their flour, and that penny is the enrichment, then you'll see companies that we're putting it in will take it out because they're losing customers. So then you tend to see a lot of the flour not being enriched.
Thank you so much, Shawn.
Yeah.
Great information. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We appreciate you joining us today for From the Field. Make sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. Our From the Field for April, we'll be talking with representatives from NAWG, National Association of Wheat Growers, and that will be April 19th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. But like I said, check our social media and subscribe to our newsletter for more information on that. Also, just a reminder for everyone here, this episode will be uploaded to our podcast platforms and our YouTube channels later today. So please pass this on to anyone who couldn't make it live today. Once again, thank you, Shawn, for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and thank you, everybody, for participating.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And if you have any other questions, you can always email or reach out by phone. I'd be happy to chat.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.